Angkor Wat lies 5.5 kilometers, 3.4 miles, north of the modern town of Siem Reap, and a short distance south and slightly east of the previous capital, which was centered at Babuan. It is in an area of Cambodia where there is an important group of ancient structures. It is the southernmost of Angkor's main sites. According to one legend, the construction of Angkor Wat was ordered by Indra to act as a palace for his son Prachakitmaya. 5. According to the 13th century Chinese traveler Dogwin Zhu, it was believed by some that the temple was constructed in a single night by a divine architect. 6. The initial design and construction of the temple took place in the first half of the 12th century, during the reign of Suryavarman II, ruled 1113 c. 1150. Dedicated to Vishnu, it was built as the King's State Temple in capital city. As neither the foundation stele nor any contemporary inscriptions referring to the temple have been found, its original name is unknown, but it may have been known as Vishnu Lok, after the presiding deity. Work seems to have ended shortly after the king's death, leaving some of the bas-relief decoration unfinished. 7. In 1177, approximately 27 years after the death of Suryavarman II, Angkor was sacked by the Chams, the traditional enemies of the Khmer. Thereafter the empire was restored by a new king, Jayavarman VII, who established a new capital and state temple, Angkor Thom and Abayan respectively, a few kilometers to the north. Toward the end of the 12th century, Angkor Wat gradually transformed from a Hindu center of worship to Buddhism, which continues to the present day. 1. Angkor Wat is unusual among the Angkor temples in that although it was somewhat neglected after the 16th century, it was never completely abandoned, its preservation being due in part to the fact that its moat also provided some protection from encroachment by the jungle. 8. One of the first Western visitors to the temple was Antonio de Madalena, a Portuguese monk who visited in 1586 and said that it is of such extraordinary construction that it is not possible to describe it with a pen, particularly since it is like no other building in the world. It has towers and decoration and all the refinements which the human genius can conceive of. 9. In the mid-19th century, the temple was visited by the French naturalist and explorer, Henri Mouhot, who popularized the site in the West through the publication of travel notes, in which he wrote, "One of these temples rival to that of Solomon, and erected by some ancient Michelangelo, might take an honorable place beside our most beautiful buildings. It is grander than anything left to us by Greece or Rome, and presents a sad contrast to the state of barbarism in which the nation is now plunged." 10. Mouhot, like other early Western visitors, found it difficult to believe that the Khmers could have built the temple, and mistakenly dated it to around the same era as Rome. The true history of Angkor Wat was pieced together only from stylistic and epigraphic evidence accumulated during the subsequent clearing and restoration work carried out across the whole Angkor site. There are no ordinary dwellings or houses or other signs of settlement including cooking utensils, weapons, or items of clothing usually found at ancient sites. Instead there is the evidence of the monuments themselves. 11. Facade of Angkor Wat, a drawing by Henri Mouhot. 1870 by Émile Zola. French postcard about Angkor Wat in 1911. Angkor Wat required considerable restoration in the 20th century, mainly the removal of accumulated earth and vegetation. 12. Work was interrupted by the Civil War and Khmer Rouge control of the country during the 1970s and 1980s, but relatively little damage was done during this period other than the theft and destruction of mostly post-Angkorian statues. 13. The temple is a powerful symbol of Cambodia, and is a source of great national pride that has factored into Cambodia's diplomatic relations with France, the United States and its neighbor Thailand. A depiction of Angkor Wat has been a part of Cambodian national flags since the introduction of the first version circa 1863. 14. From a larger historical and even trans-cultural perspective, however, The Temple of Angkor Wat did not become a symbol of national pride sui generis but had been inscribed into a larger politico-cultural process of French colonial heritage production in which the original temple site was presented in French colonial and universal exhibitions in Paris and Marseille between 1889 and 1937. 15 Angkor Wat's aesthetics were also on display in the plaster cast museum of Louis Delaporte called Museum do Chinois, which existed in the Parisian Trocadero Palace from c. 1880 to the mid-1922s. 16. The splendid artistic legacy of Angkor Wat and other Khmer monuments in the Angkor region led directly to France adopting Cambodia as a protectorate on 11 August 1863 and invading Siam to take control of the ruins. This quickly led to Cambodia reclaiming lands in the northwestern corner of the country that had been under Siamese Thai control since 1351 AD, Manichjum Sai 2001, or by some accounts, 1431 AD. 17. Cambodia gained independence from France on 9 November 1953 and has controlled Angkor Wat since that time. It is safe to say that from the colonial period onwards until the site's nomination as UNESCO World Heritage in 1992, this specific temple of Angkor Wat was instrumental in the formation of the modern and gradually globalized concept of built cultural heritage. 18. Detailed plan of the central structure. Angkor Wat, located at 13 degrees 24, 45, and 103 degrees 52. 0. E is a unique combination of the Temple Mountain, the standard design for the Empire's state temples, and the later plan of concentric galleries. The temple is a representation of Mount Meru, the home of the gods. The central encompassing towers symbolizes the 5 peaks of the mountain, and the walls and moat the surrounding mountain ranges and ocean. 19. Access to the upper areas of the temple was progressively more exclusive, with the laity being admitted only to the lowest level. 20. Unlike most Khmer temples, Angkor Wat is oriented to the west rather than the east. This has led many, including Maurice Glaze and George Coates, to conclude that Sarai Varman intended it to serve as his funerary temple. 21. Further evidence for this view is provided by the bas-reliefs, which proceed in a counterclockwise direction per Savya in Hindu terminology, as this is the reverse of the normal order. Rituals take place in reverse order during Brahminic funeral services. 12. The archaeologist Charles Hyam also describes a container which may have been a funerary jar which was recovered from the central tower. 22. It has been nominated by some as the greatest expenditure of energy on the disposal of a corpse. 23. Freeman and Jacques, however, note that several other temples of Angkor depart from the typical Eastern orientation, and suggest that Angkor Wat's alignment was due to its dedication to Vishnu, who was associated with the West. 19. A further interpretation of Angkor Wat has been proposed by Eleanor Manica. Drawing on the temple's alignment and dimensions and on the content and arrangement of the bas-reliefs, she argues that the structure represents a claimed new era of peace under King Sarai of Armandu. As the measurements of solar and lunar time cycles were built into the sacred space of Angkor Wat, this divine mandate to rule was anchored to consecrated chambers and corridors meant to perpetuate the king's power and to honor and legati the deities manifest in the heavens above. 24. 25. Manica's suggestions have been received with a mixture of interest and skepticism in academic circles. 22. She distances herself from the speculations of others, such as Graham Hancock, that Angkor Wat is part of the representation of the constellation Draco. 26. Upper Gallery at Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat is the prime example of the classical style of Khmer architecture, the Angkor Wat style to which it has given its name. By the 12th century, Khmer architects had become skilled and confident in the use of sandstone rather than brick or laterite as the main building material. Most of the visible areas are of sandstone blocks, while laterite was used for the outer wall and for hidden structural parts. The binding agent used to join the blocks is yet to be identified, although natural resins or slate lime has been suggested. 27. The The temple has drawn praise above all for the harmony of its design. According to Maurice Calais, a mid-20th century conservator of Angkor, the temple attains a classic perfection by the restrained monumentality of its finely balanced elements and the precise arrangement of its proportions. It is a work of power, unity and style. 28. Architecturally, the elements characteristic of the style include the ogival, redented towers shaped like lotus buds, half-galleries to broaden passageways, axial galleries connecting enclosures, and the cruciform terraces which appear along the main axis of the temple. Typical decorative elements are devatas, or apsaras, reliefs and on pediments extensive garlands and narrative scenes. The statuary of Angkor Wat is considered conservative, being more static and less graceful than earlier work. 29. Other elements of the design have been destroyed by looting in the passage of time, including gilded stucco on the towers, gilding on some figures on the bas-reliefs and wooden ceiling panels and doors. 30.